This is Dr. Ron's Words of Wisdom. Words on leadership, goal setting, productivity, and a whole lot more. I want you to consider this your vitamin or supplement for your mind and heart. And wherever you receive podcasts, will you please subscribe to Dr. Ron's Words of Wisdom and leave a rating and a brief written review? It'll really help others be able to locate this podcast. I have a website, drronblake.com, and I have several links on there, and one of them is to my blog, Wesley's Horse. But you can just go to that website, press the blog tab. I have a blog article I wrote some time ago based on an article I found by Marla Tabaka on 50 tough questions you never ask yourself and should. And if you'll just look that up, you can go and find more about this through my blog. Also, if you'd like to get on the phone with me, go to drronblake.com/call, and I will call you, get on my calendar, and I'll see if there's a possibility together for both of us that I could come alongside and coach you. I'm looking for people who maybe feel a little bit stuck or want to take their leadership to the next level. I'd love to talk with you to see if there's any possibility of us working together. Today on our podcast, I'm going to have part 2 of tough questions you should ask yourself, but you never do. And it comes from an article written by Marla Tabaka, as I've mentioned. And I listed a few of those questions on the last podcast and going to finish up today. What I found interesting in all of this is there was not particularly anything that I'd never heard of before, nor anything that I had not thought about. But we're many times in leadership the ones who are asking tough questions, and oftentimes we're answering tough questions. But do we really ask ourselves tough questions, or do we have the tendency to avoid them? And I don't know where you are right now in your leadership, but I think if you could take some of these questions and get alone, quiet your heart, write down the answers, and take it seriously, I think it would really make a difference in your life. The question that I want to start with today of tough questions you never ask yourself but should is, what do I most often choose to ignore? This is just another blended way of talking about procrastination. Also, if you go to my website, drronblake.com, I have a workbook and a study sheet on how to beat procrastination. When you find there are certain chores, certain activities, certain actions that you choose to ignore, when you're in leadership, there are some vital things that must be done, and if you do not do them, your leadership and your life will begin to suffer. And maybe one of the first places to start when dealing with conflict or other areas of life and leadership that I choose to ignore is just have a tough question and answer session with yourself. What are the things that I choose to ignore? I think the follow-up question to that is why? How can I change? How can I look at these things? How can I quit ignoring them? I think one of the top ones is one I've alluded to, is conflict. I have said it often, not very many people love and thrive in conflict, though I've met some who do, who are sort of a conflict magnet. But if you ignore it and you keep allowing it to go on without having the tough conversations, without taking care of what needs to be taken care of, the end result is oftentimes more painful than if you had just buckled down initially, had the difficult conversation, made the tough decision, lived with the fallout, managed it, and moved on. Oftentimes, the longer you kick the can down the road, the worse it actually becomes. But I'm not just wanting you to list, these are the activities that I have a tendency to ignore. I'm also wanting you to ask the larger question, why is that? Why do I avoid certain things? Why are there certain behaviors in my life that I just go out of my way to avoid? Now, don't wait till the end of a year to ask this question, but the next question I want to look at is, what are three things that I want to pay closer attention to? Now, I don't know all of you, but all of us have some areas because it's very easy to become distracted, and we have tunnel vision when it comes to certain things. But are there some things in my life that I really need to consider? If you're listening to this around the time of a new year, you might even ask yourself, have I been ignoring my health? Do I need to pay closer attention? Has my personal debt gotten out of control? Do I need to pay closer attention? Are there some things in the world of where I lead that I'm not having those tough conversations? I'm not taking care of business. Are there areas in your relationships, in your spiritual walk? Just list, what are three areas? What are three things in my life right now that going forward I need to pay closer attention to? Here's the next question that really confronted me when I read it for the first time. Can I be a better listener? I am a listener in progress. I want to believe with all of my heart that I'm a better listener today than I have been, but that isn't an overly high bar I'm aspiring to. I am an extrovert. I love to talk. I read a lot, so I think I have information to add to most conversations. But the good Lord gave me 2 ears and 1 mouth, so for sure I ought to be listening twice as much as I'm talking. And the other realization that I came to is I can't remember too many times that I learned something when I was talking, but I can think of hundreds of times, probably thousands of times, that I learned something when I wasn't talking and I was listening. I really came to believe some time ago that one of the greatest gifts that I can give someone is not just to hand them some money. It's the gift of time and the gift of listening. Not really just listening audibly with my ears, but really hearing what they're saying, hearing their heartbeat, hearing the things that are important to them. It's not just our agenda. It's not just our pontification and bloviating. We need to listen. Can you remember a time when you were pouring your heart out? You may have been going through a crisis. You may have been going through a dark place for your soul. You may have been in a place where you did not know if you were going to make it in your marriage, in your work, however it was. And someone came alongside of you and really, truly listened to you. And you can still remember it to this day. Now, to whom much is given, much is required. So it would seem to me, those of us who have received that, we ought to be the best listeners today. We ought to be present with our kids, with our spouses, with our friends, with our employees, with our co-workers, with our neighbors, literally with everyone. I went into the Starbucks in another town as I was driving to a meeting in the area of the country where I have my jurisdiction, and there was a man there. It was a town I don't even live in. I just pass through it periodically. There was a man there who had moved to this little town from clear on the other side of our country. I didn't know him, but we started with just a simple greeting and a smile. And he ended up talking to me about 10 or 15 minutes, found out what I do for a living, began to pour his heart out. And I just mostly listened. I spoke very little. I know that'll be hard for you to believe. But he shook my hand warmly when he left and told me I'd given him the greatest advice and he had never really thought about it. I'm not sure I said more than 2 or 3 paragraphs in 10, 15 minutes to him. I just really focused in on listening to him. And that's a man that I more than likely will never, ever see again in my life. And I think he was helped because a stranger in a coffee shop listened, and really, I didn't interrupt him. I didn't correct him. I did say a few things to him. So, can I be a better listener? Without question. Am I trying to work on that? Absolutely. Another question, leader, that is important for us to consider. It's a tough question. Do I carefully consider the suggestions of others before I dismiss them? Wow, that's an important question for leaders to grapple with. For oftentimes we feel like we have the information, we've been elevated to positions of leadership, so therefore we ought to be able to make the decision. We have the information. Someone comes to us with an idea, and because of our history with people or who they are, what position they may hold, oftentimes I find myself almost dismissing them before they even begin to speak. And I'm asking God to help me break that habit. If you and I will really listen to the people around us, we will hear great ideas that never once entered our mind or heart. And so I am asking God to help me not only to be a better listener, but to not just dismiss the ideas of others and to say, not just say that's a good idea. If it's not a good idea, you can say thanks for sharing or I appreciate it and I'll take it under advisement. But don't just dismiss it out of hand without pondering it, praying if you're a spiritual person, thinking about it. Yes, all of us need to work on being a better listener. On a scale of 1 to 5, the next question, how optimal is my self-care? This has become a very big deal for me, for oftentimes in the early days and middle-aged years of my life, I did not give much thought or time to self-care. And I have come to see in my life that self-care is so vitally important. You are not so important, and you are not so absolutely essential that you don't need to take time out and take care of yourself. Oftentimes, years ago, if I would go to the gym or go for a walk or do something in the area of self-care, I felt like I was loafing or cheating or not working. And this is just a little psychological thing I did. It may not help you or even resonate with you. But when I began to put exercise and going to the gym on my calendar and treating it like an appointment with myself, it changed the way I looked at it. And then I came to this understanding. If I don't take care of myself and I'm not in the position that I'm in, I won't be able to help anyone anyway. So one of the most helpful things I can do for myself, my family, and my constituency is to invest time in self-care. Another question, are there any relationships that I want to repair or improve? Has there been some that I've had a crossword with or a bad experience, and it's always sort of back there in the back of my mind that I really need to take care of that. I really need to speak into that. Why don't you write a card, pick up a phone, set up a meeting, and do your best to repair that relationship? There's a Bible verse that says, as much as lies within you, live at peace with all people. Well, what that verse helps me understand is there are some people that you can't live at peace with, but you should never be the reason. And so, as much as lies within me, I want to have peaceful relationships. Now, I'm not going to compromise the truth or nor my integrity, but are there some relationships that could use some repair? Why don't we try to do that? You have been listening to Dr. Ron's Words of Wisdom, words on leadership, goal setting, productivity, and a whole lot more. I trust that you will consider this like a vitamin and supplement for your mind and heart, And wherever you receive podcasts from, please subscribe to Dr. Ron's Words of Wisdom. And then leave a review, and a brief written review and a rating would be so helpful. You can find Dr. Ron's Words of Wisdom on iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, TuneIn, Podbean, just about anywhere podcasts are located. And again, if you'd like to have a call with me, go to drronblake.com/call. Get on my calendar. Let's see if there's an area where I can come alongside and help and coach you. Listen, my leadership friend, you are doing better than you think you are. You really, really are. And until next time, this is Dr. Ron saying, have a great and blessed day.